The Galactic Council chamber was filled with the echoes of self-assured voices, layered in tones of superiority, and centuries of unchallenged wisdom. Among them, the HFY stood as one of the most dominant races, their technology surpassing even the oldest civilizations. Their sleek, metallic bodies gleamed under the artificial lights, their elongated skulls reflecting the brilliance of their supposed intellect. For thousands of years, they had looked down upon lesser species, measuring worth not by potential, but by technological advancements alone. And by those standards, Earth was nothing more than a primitive rock floating in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. The humans were deemed reckless, unpredictable, and above all, unworthy of respect. Though they had reached the stars, they were still a young race, one that had not yet proven itself to the mighty HFY and their allies. As the meeting progressed, the discussion took an unexpected turn. A HFY scientist, draped in ceremonial robes denoting high status, addressed the council with a grim expression. "The plague has reached critical levels," he announced. "Despite our most advanced efforts, we are losing more lives each day. Our best minds have spent centuries searching for a cure, but we have failed. The disease adapts faster than we can counter it. We are running out of time." A hush fell over the room. The HFY, known for their pride, rarely admitted failure. To see one of their own concede defeat was unsettling. The council members exchanged uneasy glances, but none spoke. The problem was clear. If the HFY, the pinnacle of intelligence, could not solve this crisis, then surely no one could. One of the elder counselors, a being with translucent blue skin and piercing golden eyes, finally broke the silence. "If even the great HFY are unable to solve this mystery, then what hope is there? Our medical knowledge surpasses all known sciences. If the plague defies even your understanding, then it is simply unsolvable." There was a murmur of agreement. The HFY scientist, however, hesitated before speaking again. "There is one alternative, a desperate one." He swallowed his pride before continuing. "We could seek assistance, beyond our empire, beyond the known elite of the galaxy." The suggestion alone was enough to spark outrage. Other species, inferior species, the very idea was offensive. But before the protests could grow, the scientists spoke again. "There is one race. Though they are primitive, they are unpredictable. Their methods are chaotic, but they have accomplished the impossible before. They call themselves humans." The chamber erupted in laughter, a cold and hollow sound that echoed off the high walls. "You propose that we, HFY, seek help from a species that has barely mastered interstellar travel." One of the elders scoffed. "A species that fights among themselves. A race that still relies on crude machines and outdated philosophies." Another council member sneered. "They are not scientists. They are wanderers, warriors, traders, but not healers. What could they possibly know that we do not?" The HFY scientist remained silent for a long moment before he finally spoke. "They have survived against all odds. Their medical science may not be the most advanced, but it is the most adaptable. Their ability to think in ways we cannot comprehend, that is what makes them dangerous, and perhaps what makes them our last hope." His words lingered in the air, forcing the others to reconsider. It was true that humanity had defied expectations before. They had emerged from their small planet and spread among the stars with a determination that was difficult to ignore. They had fought wars and endured struggles that would have wiped out more sophisticated civilizations. But could they truly solve a problem that had plagued the HFY for centuries? The very thought was humiliating. Yet desperation had a way of breaking even the strongest pride. And so, after much debate, the council relented. A message was sent to Earth, one that was laced with condescension even as it masked the underlying plea for help. The humans, ever unpredictable, responded not with arrogance nor hesitation, but with curiosity. A team of their scientists, lesser beings in the eyes of the HFY, agreed to travel to the alien homeworld. The Exilari expected failure. They expected the humans to arrive, to fumble with outdated equipment, and to realize the enormity of the problem before leaving in disgrace. What they did not expect was for the humans to approach the problem differently from the very moment they arrived. When the human team landed, they did not ask for access to the most advanced medical technologies or demand to see the failed experiments of the past. Instead, they asked simple questions, questions that the Xilari, in all their wisdom, had never considered. Has anyone tried approaching the disease from an evolutionary standpoint? One human scientist asked as he studied a holographic projection of the virus. What if it's not just mutating randomly, but responding to something in your environment? Another human, a biologist, examined the records with narrowed eyes. Your people have been using the same treatment strategies for centuries. What if the disease has adapted not just to survive, but to use those very treatments as a way to grow stronger? The Exilari doctors listened in stunned silence. These were not the questions of a primitive race. These were the questions of minds that saw beyond what was already known, minds that challenged even the most sacred of scientific principles. Within hours, the human team discovered something that had eluded the Exilari for generations. A single overlooked genetic sequence embedded within the disease. A weakness, a vulnerability that had always been there, hiding in plain sight. The Xilari had never found it, not because they were incapable, but because they had never thought to look outside their rigid methodologies. The humans, unburdened by centuries of unchallenged beliefs, had found the flaw in mere hours. The cure was not a complex serum, nor an expensive procedure. It was a simple alteration of an existing treatment, a minor adjustment that had never been considered before. And when the first infected Xilari was injected with the new formula, the results were undeniable. The plague, the unstoppable force that had haunted their species for centuries, was gone. The realization sent a ripple of unease through the Xilari elite. How could this be? How could a race they had dismissed as primitive solve in a single day what their greatest minds had failed to accomplish for centuries? The weight of their arrogance pressed down upon them. They had spent so long believing themselves superior that they had blinded themselves to new ways of thinking. And in their blindness, they had nearly doomed themselves. As the news spread, so did a new fear. If humans could do this, if they could outthink one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy without even trying, what else were they capable of? The Galactic Council, once dismissive of Earth, now found themselves looking at humanity with a mixture of awe, fear, and most disturbingly, respect. For the first time in history, the arrogance of the galaxy's elite had been shattered. And it was shattered not by war, nor by conquest, but by the ingenuity of a species they had refused to take seriously. The age of Xilari dominance was over. The age of humanity had begun. The Galactic Council had never been known for humility. It was an ancient organization, composed of the oldest and most advanced species in the galaxy, each one possessing centuries of technological superiority over the younger, lesser races. They ruled the stars not by brute force, but through knowledge and control. Among them, the Xilari, the Velth, and the Orcs were considered the pinnacle of intelligence, their civilization spanning thousands of years. And then there was humanity, an anomaly, a race that had only recently emerged into the galactic scene, unrefined and unpredictable. Though they had made their mark through sheer determination and a history of relentless survival, they were still considered primitive by the galactic elite. The humans had no vast fleets, no unmatched technologies, no legendary warriors. To the Council, they were nothing more than an ambitious species that had risen too quickly, their presence tolerated but never respected. But now, as the chamber echoed with murmurs of uncertainty, a single undeniable fact loomed over the gathered council members. Humanity was their last hope. The great empires, with all their power and intelligence, had encountered a force they could not understand, let alone control. A biological terror unlike anything recorded before had spread through the core worlds, a sickness that defied every known cure. It was a plague without origin, striking indiscriminately and adapting faster than any countermeasure. It had started with minor infections, but within weeks, entire planets had fallen silent, their populations vanishing into the abyss of extinction. The Council's finest scientists had exhausted their knowledge, their laboratories filled with the failures of their once unshakable confidence. The arrogance that had defined them for eons was now their greatest weakness. A desperate decision had been made. A request had been sent to Earth. The very idea of pleading with a species so recently dismissed as inferior was almost unthinkable, but desperation had a way of reshaping pride into humility. The humans had responded, not with arrogance, not with demands, but with a simple, unsettling reply. We will come. No negotiations, no hesitation. Just those 3 words. And so, the Council now awaited their arrival, gathered in uneasy silence within the towering halls of the Galactic Assembly. The humans arrived without spectacle, stepping into the chamber with an air of calm that unnerved the watching Council members. There were no grand displays of superiority, no attempts to posture or demand recognition. Instead, the leader of the human delegation, a woman named Dr. Evelyn Carter, walked forward, her expression unreadable. Behind her, a team of human scientists carried simple cases, their movements efficient and precise. The Exilary representative, his elongated skull gleaming under the chamber lights, regarded her with barely concealed disdain. "You understand why you are here?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of superiority. Dr. Carter met his gaze without flinching. "You have a problem," she said simply. "You asked for our help. We're here to solve it." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The humans were not intimidated. That in itself was unusual. The Exilary scientist beside the representative narrowed his glowing eyes. "We have studied this disease for years. It is beyond even our knowledge. What makes you think you can succeed where we have failed?" Carter tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. "Because we think differently," she replied. "Show us what you have." The Council hesitated. To allow humans access to their most classified data was an insult to their own pride, a silent admission of inferiority. But there was no choice. Reluctantly, the chamber's great display flickered to life, revealing layers of data, genetic sequences, failed treatments, research spanning entire generations. The humans studied it without speaking, their eyes scanning the projections with a focus that sent unease crawling through the gathered council members. Minutes passed, then an hour. The silence grew heavier. The Exilary scientist crossed his arms. "Do you see now?" he said, his voice laced with condescension. "This is not a simple virus. It evolves faster than any known pathogen. Your crude methods will not work." Dr. Carter didn't respond immediately. Instead, she exchanged a glance with one of her team members, a biologist who tapped something into his handheld device before nodding. Finally, Carter turned back to the Council. "You're right about one thing," she said. "Your methods won't work, but that's because you've been trying to cure it like a disease." The Exilary frowned. "And what else would it be?" Carter took a step closer to the display. "A weapon." The chamber erupted into confusion. Council members muttered among themselves, voices overlapping in disbelief. "Impossible," the Valth representative said. "A natural evolution of this magnitude is rare, but not unheard of." "It's not natural," Carter said firmly. "Look at the mutation pattern. It doesn't behave like an organic virus. It's too controlled, too precise. Someone designed this." The council members froze. If the humans were right, then this wasn't just a crisis. It was an act of war. And worse, they had no idea who the enemy was. The realization sent a chill through the chamber. The Exilary scientist, despite his earlier arrogance, looked shaken. "If this is true," he began, but his voice faltered. Carter folded her arms. "Then you're not dealing with a plague," she said. You're dealing with a targeted attack, and your enemy is using biology as their weapon. The silence was suffocating. No one wanted to believe it, yet the evidence was undeniable. The question was no longer how to cure the disease, but how to stop its creators. For the first time in galactic history, the Council found itself looking to humans not as inferiors, not as unpredictable newcomers, but as the one species that had faced endless wars, biological horrors, and existential threats, and survived every single one. The desperate request had been made. Now, the fate of the galaxy rested in human hands. And if there was one thing the Council was beginning to understand, it was that humans had a way of solving problems, even the impossible ones. The research station floated in the cold silence of space, orbiting a dead planet that had long been forgotten by the galaxy. No life signs, no civilization, just an empty wasteland of rock and dust that had never been considered important. For centuries, this planet had remained untouched, a lifeless husk in the vast darkness. But now, something had changed. A weak energy signal had been detected, one that shouldn't exist. The Galactic Science Division had dispatched their best team to investigate, expecting nothing more than an anomaly, a glitch in their sensors. What they found instead would shake the foundations of everything the galaxy believed to be true. Dr. Alan Reeves, the lead human scientist on the mission, stared at the readings on his terminal, his mind struggling to comprehend what was in front of him. The rest of the team was silent, their faces pale with disbelief. The ruins they had uncovered beneath the planet's surface were not just ancient, they were impossible. The stone structures, covered in strange symbols and worn by time, were unmistakably artificial. But that wasn't what had sent a wave of shock through the entire crew. It was the language etched into the walls. It was human. The markings, though aged and worn, were undeniably similar to Earth's ancient scripts, resembling something that should have only existed in human history books. But this planet was thousands of light years away from Earth, in a part of the galaxy that no human had ever set foot in before. There was no logical explanation. Commander Varric, the auxiliary officer overseeing the mission, stepped closer to the carvings, his elongated fingers brushing against the symbols with a mixture of caution and disbelief. This cannot be," he said, his voice quieter than usual. The auxiliary were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, their knowledge spanning millennia. And yet even they had never encountered anything like this before. Humans were never meant to be here. Your species is young, far too young for something like this. Reeves exhaled sharply, his mind racing through possibilities, but none of them made sense. "I know what," he said, "and that's what terrifies me the most." He turned back to his team. "Run every scan possible. We need to understand what we're looking at." The research drones moved through the ruins, scanning every inch of the structure, analyzing the materials, searching for any sign of who or what had built this place. The deeper they went, the stranger the readings became. The architecture was not only familiar, but the carbon dating results were even more baffling. These ruins were over 100,000 years old. That was older than human civilization, older than humanity itself. The realization sent a chill through the entire team. How could there be human writing in a place that predated humanity? Dr. Marilyn, one of the xenolinguists on the team, looked up from her datapad, her hands trembling. "It's not just the language," she whispered. "These symbols, they match the oldest recorded texts from Earth, texts from civilizations that existed before humans even understood space travel." She looked at Reeves with something close to fear in her eyes. "What if we're not the first?" The words sent a heavy silence through the group. The implications were too vast, too terrifying. If humans had never been here before, then someone else had left these messages behind. Someone who either looked like them or knew about them long before they had ever left Earth. The question was, who? And why had they disappeared? As the team moved deeper into the ruins, the energy readings grew stronger. The source of the anomaly was close. The passage led them into a massive underground chamber, where a strange structure stood at the center. A towering monolith covered in the same ancient script, humming with a faint, unnatural glow. It was still active. The realization made Reeves' breath hitch. Whatever this was, it had not been abandoned. It had been waiting. The moment the team stepped closer, the air itself seemed to change. The monolith responded, its glow intensifying, symbols shifting as if alive. Then, without warning, a pulse of energy surged through the room. The researchers staggered back as their devices flickered and failed. And then, a voice echoed through the chamber, not in sound, but directly into their minds. "You have returned." The words sent a shiver down Reeves' spine. They were not spoken in an alien tongue. They were in English, ancient, formal, but unmistakably human. The team froze, exchanging looks of shock and fear. The voice continued, resonating with something deep inside them. "The cycle has begun again." Reeves swallowed hard, stepping forward despite every instinct screaming at him to stop. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What is this place?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then the monolith responded. A projection flickered to life, revealing a figure clad in armor unlike anything known to the galaxy. The figure looked human. And yet, there was something different. The eyes were too sharp, the posture too rigid. The voice spoke again. "You do not remember, but we do." The team was frozen in place, their minds reeling. Reeves forced himself to speak. "Remember what?" The figure's gaze locked onto him, as if searching for something within him. "The truth of your kind. The war that was lost. The exile." Reeves felt his heart pound against his chest. What war? The image flickered, revealing glimpses of a battle beyond anything he had ever seen. Ships of impossible design clashed in the void, entire planets consumed in fire. And at the heart of it all, humans, not as they were now, but as something more, something greater, warriors of a forgotten era. The voice was solemn. "You were not the first." The words settled over the team like a heavy weight. The implications were staggering. Humanity had been here before. They had built empires, fought wars, and lost. But if that was true, why had history erased it? Why was Earth's past nothing more than a blank slate before its rise? Reeves' mind raced. Had humanity once ruled the stars, only to be cast down and forced to start over? Had their entire history been rewritten, their past stolen from them? And if this place was still active, did that mean the enemy that had defeated them was still out there? The monolith pulsed again, and the voice spoke one final time. "The cycle begins anew. You must be ready." Then, as suddenly as it had awakened, the energy faded. The chamber grew silent once more. The monolith stood dark and lifeless, as if it had never spoken at all. But the truth had been revealed. Humanity's past was a lie. And now, they had to uncover the rest of it, before it was too late. The Galactic Council had never considered humans as anything more than an insignificant species, barely worthy of recognition. The great civilizations of the galaxy, races that had conquered entire star systems and shaped the course of history, viewed Earth as primitive, a backwater planet filled with creatures too fragile and too reckless to survive the dangers of space. Even when humanity finally joined the galactic stage, they were met with condescension, their advancements dismissed as mere luck rather than skill. But all of that changed the day the Yelath Empire declared war on them. The Yelath were an ancient species, their empire spanning thousands of years, their military unmatched. No civilization had ever stood against them and survived. They struck without warning, seeing Earth as an easy conquest, a new territory to add to their growing domain. The Council had not intervened. In their eyes, humanity was doomed before the war had even begun. But what followed in the coming months would forever alter the way the galaxy viewed the humans. The first battle was expected to be a slaughter. Yelath warships, massive and bristling with weapons, descended upon the human colonies in Alpha Centauri. The invasion force was overwhelming, their technology superior. But the humans did not run. They did not surrender. They fought with a determination that the Yelath had never encountered before. Their ships, though smaller and less advanced, moved in ways that defied logic, dodging, weaving, counterattacking with a precision that seemed impossible. Human pilots, unlike their alien counterparts, did not rely entirely on eye-assisted targeting. They adapted, improvised, and made decisions based on instinct rather than calculations. It was chaos, but it was effective. The Yelath lost an entire fleet that day, and for the first time in centuries, they realized they had underestimated their enemy. As the war continued, reports from the battlefield shocked the Galactic Council. The humans were not just surviving, they were winning. The Yelath launched massive offensives, deploying their most fearsome weapons, but the humans refused to break. They fought in ways that defied traditional warfare, using strategies that no other species had ever considered. They sacrificed ships in seemingly reckless maneuvers, only for those same sacrifices to lead to victories. They turned their own planets into death traps, using the very environments against their invaders. And worst of all, they adapted after every battle, growing stronger, learning faster than any enemy should. The Council began to take notice. The same humans they had once mocked now held the attention of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. The arrogance of the other races began to crack as they watched, in disbelief, as an inferior species outmaneuvered an empire that had crushed countless worlds before them. The Yelath, once confident in their superiority, started making desperate moves, their frustration evident in their increasingly reckless attacks. And then came the event that shook the entire galaxy. A Yelath fleet, larger than anything the humans had faced before, launched a direct assault on Earth itself. The battle was brutal, stretching for days as human forces struggled to hold the line. The Yelath believed that taking Earth would finally break their enemy's spirit, but they were wrong. What happened instead became the moment that forced the galaxy to reconsider everything they thought they knew about humanity. In the final hours of the battle, when it seemed like the Yelath would finally overwhelm Earth's defenses, the humans did something unthinkable. They didn't just fight back. They took the war straight to the Yelath homeworld. A fleet of human ships, far smaller in number, executed a maneuver that no other species would have dared attempt. They bypassed the Yelath defenses entirely, striking at the heart of the empire itself. In a coordinated assault that required perfect timing and absolute precision, human forces crippled the Yelath leadership in a matter of hours. The war was over. The galaxy went silent. The Yelath, once seen as an unstoppable force, had been defeated, not by another ancient empire, not by a race with superior technology, but by humans. A species that had been laughed at, dismissed, and ignored had just done the impossible. The Galactic Council, once indifferent to Earth, now viewed humanity with a mixture of awe and fear. Everything had changed. Humanity was no longer an afterthought. They were no longer the weak newcomers to the stars. They had proven, beyond any doubt, that they were a force to be reckoned with. And in that moment, as the surviving Yelath surrendered, the rest of the galaxy realized the truth. They had not been watching a primitive species struggling to survive. They had been watching the rise of the most dangerous civilization the galaxy had ever seen. The war had ended, but the galaxy had changed forever. The once mighty Yelath Empire had fallen, defeated not by another ancient power, but by humans, a species that had been dismissed as weak and insignificant. For centuries, the Galactic Council had looked down upon Earth, seeing its people as reckless, emotional, and unworthy of respect. Now, those same leaders sat in silence, watching as the human representatives took their seats at the highest table of power. It was a moment none of them had ever imagined. The balance of the galaxy had shifted, and the rules that had governed it for thousands of years were no longer in place. The humans had not just won a war. They had rewritten history. When the war began, the Council had expected it to be nothing more than a minor conflict, a brief display of the Yeleth's dominance. The humans had been newcomers, their technology primitive, their fleet small. No one had believed they could survive, let alone fight back. But battle after battle, the humans had proven them wrong. Their resilience was unmatched, their tactics unpredictable. They adapted in ways no other species could. Where other civilizations fought with logic and calculated strategies, humans fought with instinct, with emotion, with an unbreakable will. And in the end, it was that very nature that had allowed them to do the impossible, to bring an empire to its knees. Now, as the leaders of the galaxy gathered for the first summit since the war, an unease settled over the Grand Chamber. The Council Hall had once been a place of order, where the most powerful civilizations dictated the fate of the lesser ones. But now, the power dynamic had changed. The humans did not come as beggars, or as victors demanding spoils. They came as equals, or perhaps something greater. They had not only won the war, they had exposed the weaknesses of every so-called superior species in the galaxy. The illusions of power that the Council had relied upon for centuries had been shattered, and the other races knew it. Admiral Ethan Cole, the man who had led the final strike against the Yeleth homeworld, stood before the assembled council. He was not like the other leaders. There was no arrogance in his stance, no hunger for conquest in his eyes. He spoke with calm authority, his words measured but firm. "We did not ask for this war," he began, his voice carrying through the chamber. "We did not seek to conquer or destroy, but when the Yeleth came for us, we had no choice but to fight. And when we fight, we do not stop until the threat is gone." He let those words settle before continuing. "The war is over, but the way this galaxy operates, it cannot remain the same." Murmurs spread through the room. The older empires, those who had ruled for thousands of years, shifted uncomfortably. Change was not something they accepted easily. But the humans had earned the right to dictate the future. No one could deny that now. The representative of the Vatheri, a species known for their cold logic, spoke first. "And what is it that humanity proposes?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "What does your kind seek to reshape?" Ethan's expression remained steady. "We seek balance," he replied. "For too long, power has been held by a few, while others have been ignored or crushed underfoot. We will not allow what happened to us to happen again, to any species. No longer will the strong prey upon the weak without consequence. There will be laws, true laws, that apply to all. And we will ensure they are enforced." The silence that followed was heavy. This was not a request. It was a declaration. The humans were not asking for a place at the table. They were remaking the table itself. The representative of the Thalnar, a reptilian species that had long aligned themselves with the Yeleth, narrowed his eyes. "You mean to make yourselves the enforcers of this new order?" he asked, a hint of challenge in his tone. "You assume the right to dictate how the galaxy should function." Ethan met his gaze without hesitation. "We assume nothing," he said. "We earned this position with blood and sacrifice, and if the alternative is allowing another empire to rise and repeat the mistakes of the past, then yes, we will take that responsibility." His voice did not waver. "You may not like it, but you all saw what happened when the Yeleth tried to impose their rule on us. You know how that ended. The threat was unspoken, but it was clear. Humanity was not here to conquer. But if any species attempted to threaten the balance again, they would find themselves facing the same fate as the Yeleth." The council chamber remained tense as the realization settled in. The humans were not here to bow to the old ways. They were here to ensure those ways never returned. The galaxy had lived under the rule of ancient empires for millennia, their power unchallenged. But today that era had ended. A new order had begun, and it was humanity that would shape it. As the summit continued, the other species slowly began to accept the reality before them. Some resisted at first, clinging to the old ways, but deep down, They knew the truth. The galaxy had changed. There was no going back. Humanity had not only survived, they had risen. And with them, the entire galaxy would have to evolve or risk being left behind. For centuries, the older races had believed they were superior, that they were the pinnacle of civilization. They had thought of humanity as a lesser species, an afterthought. But today, as the summit came to a close, one thing was undeniable. The humans were no longer the underestimated. They were no longer the weak. They were the future, and the galaxy would never be the same again.